Are you curious what it takes to retire in your 50s? I've been a financial advisor now for over 20 years, and in today's video, I'm going to share with you 3 crucial steps that you have to take if you'd like to retire in your 50s. Let's jump in. The first one is going to sound very counterintuitive, but it's probably the most important one, and that is have an understanding of your tax situation, at least for the first couple years that you're going to be retired, because it's going to impact a lot of things. Let me unpack that. Why is understanding your taxes important? The first reason is for many retirees, it's one of their largest expenses, right? They look at their accounts, they look at where their money's going to come from, and many of the things that are going to free up money so that they can spend on retirement are going to trigger taxable events. Let's say you've been investing in the stock market and you've done well. Well, now it may be time to sell some of those stocks, to sell some of those positions in order to have the cash to live off of. And guess what? That's going to trigger income for you. So looking at what kind of income that you need in retirement and where that cash is going to come from. For most of us, we've got 3 main buckets. We've got a 401k or an IRA, and there's 2 types of those. Let's go with the regular one first. As we take money out of a regular 401k, a regular IRA, that can trigger taxable income. Now, some folks might be thinking, hey, Azul, you can't access your 401k before you turn 59 and a half without a penalty. Well, there's 2 rules that I want you to look up. One is called 72T, and the other is the rule of 55. And essentially, the IRS has a safe harbor that as long as you comply with those rules, you can take your money out a little bit sooner. So look up those 2 rules and read what it says about them on the IRS website. Again, the rule of 55 and 72T, which is substantially equal payments. So that's your regular IRA, regular 401k. But remember, you put that money in pre-tax dollars, so now as you take it out, it's going to be taxable income. Then the other bucket that we have is our Roth IRAs, our Roth 401ks. And then the final bucket is in this taxable bucket, which would be money that you have at the bank account, money that you have in a taxable brokerage account, money that as you make different transactions, you get interest on your savings account. Maybe you have a taxable brokerage account and you decide to sell a position. You're getting taxed on that every year, what I call a tax me as I go account. So knowing your taxes are really important, and for many retirees, it's going to be one of their largest expenses. So please don't overlook that. It's also going to impact, if you're retiring in your 50s, you're likely not going to be eligible for Medicare. So what are you going to do for healthcare expenses? And for many of us that are staying in the US, we're going to look at the Affordable Care Act, and we're going to look at subsidies. Well, guess what? Your subsidies are based on what your income is, what your taxable income is in the year that you receive the benefits. It's not based on the last tax year. It's based on your current tax year. I should point out I'm not an expert on that, but that's according to ehealthinsurance.com, that the subsidy is based on your current year. So not only will your taxes impact how much of your hard-earned money you have to get to the government, but it could also impact your healthcare insurance. And this is key, right? If you live in the United States, we all know this. We are one health catastrophe. If we're not insured, if we're not properly insured, we are one health catastrophe away from losing everything that we've spent our entire life saving. So make sure you understand where your healthcare insurance is coming from, how much it's going to cost you, and how you're going to pay for that. So that's the second point, is looking at your healthcare insurance. Again, if you retire when you're 50 or 51, you have a long time that you need to provide that healthcare. So do some research, talk to some experts on it, but nailing down that healthcare insurance is job number one before you retire. Okay, and the third step is to really have a plan. I've talked to people that said, hey, you know, my buddy retired when he was 53 and had less money than me, and it's worked out okay for him or her. Don't do that. First off, your buddy likely has not lived their entire life, but you know, your situation, even if you're retiring at exactly the same age, could be very, very different. So as a financial advisor, one of the first questions I ask somebody is, what does retirement look like to you? Right? If you're really into, you know, running, you're into jogging and trail running and mountain bike riding and skiing, those outdoor activities, if you're into activities that don't cost a lot of money, maybe you're into arts and crafts that can be expensive, they can also be inexpensive. So what do your expenses look like in retirement? So have a plan for that and just make sure that you have enough money to retire. And that's outside of the scope of this, but I do encourage you to work with a financial advisor that is a fiduciary to you, that's putting your needs ahead of their own, and get a feel for how much money do you need to fund the retirement that you would like to have. So let me give you an example. You know, again, somebody that says, what I do is not that expensive, I don't need that much money. Well, that's great, but you know, there's a barbell, what I call a barbell, or what other advisors call a retirement smile. You've got the go-go years where you're spending a lot of money. Then, you know, after you've done the adventures and things, your expenses go down for a while. And then at the end of life, healthcare costs can be expensive. In fact, Fidelity says that the average American, upon reaching 65 and qualifying for Medicare, is still looking at $157,000 in out-of-pocket costs that are not going to be covered for Medicare or as part of paying those premiums during your lifetime. That's for an individual. So if you're married, you got to multiply that by 2. So looking at that and just making sure that you know what those expenses are and you've planned for it. Now, you can be overly conservative. You can put everything in there and you'll never retire, right? And we don't want that to happen, so there's a balance. But one thing when it comes to your expenses, when it comes to your plan, that I urge you to try to do as best you can is test drive those retirement expenses. You know, if you're currently living on, you know, $80,000 a year and you say, hey, the things that really give me joy, you know, are the trail running and these things that don't cost much. So I'm only going to need $40,000 to live on. Well, try that if you can for a while. See what that really feels like. And if it doesn't feel sacrificial, that's absolutely great. So I told you there'd be 3 steps, but I lied. There's a bonus one that I think is really important. And if you have this characteristic, if you have this trait, I think it opens the door and gives you a lot of flexibility on your plans. But don't say that you have this trait if you don't, because that can put you in a bad situation. And that is the ability to be flexible with your plans. Let's say you're 53 years old, or you're 50, or you're 48, and you want to retire at 50. And you say, okay, I've talked to a financial advisor, and he or she says, you know, I have this % likelihood of success. You know, you want that to be as high as possible, 97, 98%. But you know what? A lot of people don't have that luxury. What if you're only at 80%? Well, if you're willing to be flexible, right? If you're willing to say, you know, this is my best attempt, and I think there's a high likelihood, right? You have an 80% chance of being fine. You have a 20% chance of needing to be flexible. And maybe if you're willing to take a part-time job, maybe if you get 4 or 5 years into retirement and you find out your expenses are higher than what you thought, you know, maybe you take another job. But if you're willing to entertain that, if you're willing to think through, how could I make additional money or how could I cut my expenses, then you have a lot of alternatives available to you. You know, I do think the retirement planning industry in general, as an advisor, like I said, I want my clients to have as high of a likelihood of success as possible. But the difference between retiring with 80% likelihood of success and 97% likelihood of success could mean you have to work, you have to postpone retirement for an additional 3, 5, or more years. So would you rather have an 80% likelihood that everything's going to work out fine, or would you rather have 100% likelihood that you're going to give up the youngest, most active years of the youth of your senior year and give up that chance to retire early when you're close? And you think, you know, I'm almost there. I think I am there. Yes, I'd love to have that 97% likelihood of success, but I'm at 85%. And you know what? I'm flexible. I'm willing to do that. But not everybody is. So please be honest with yourself. And yes, it's encouraging and it's fun to think about retiring early. It's also fun and encouraging to enjoy the journey. And I want to encourage you to enjoy the journey until you can retire. If you're not quite there yet, maybe you can ask your boss, you know, could you have a sabbatical? You might have to take it unpaid. Oftentimes, happiness comes from, in order to have a happy experience, sometimes we have to say no to more money. We have to turn things down. So, you know, if you're thinking you'd love to retire, maybe you're not at 80%, maybe you're only 60%, right? And you're like, I need more certainty for that, for which I would say that's probably a decent call for most people. Again, not financial advice. But maybe you could get a sabbatical, or maybe you could do whatever you can to enjoy your 50s and maybe even your 60s until you get a chance to retire. And that's why I made this video here, 7 things that I encourage you to stop doing in order to enjoy your 50s and 60s more. I'll see you in that video. Thanks for watching this one. Bye-bye.